They say that some friendships are eternal. But what happens when even what seemed unbreakable falls apart? This is not just any story. It is an open wound in the heart of those who once believed that love, affection, and trust were enough to keep two people together. Mia and Harper were like sisters, inseparable, accomplices, a safe haven in each other. But all it took was a lie, a made-up betrayal, to ruin everything. No, they didn't drift apart over something trivial. They destroyed each other inside. And the scariest thing? Neither of them knew the whole truth. Have you ever felt like this? Watching a castle crumble before your eyes and not understanding where it all started to go wrong. This story will touch you not only because of its emotion, but because of the depth of human emotions it carries: fear, insecurity, generosity, hope, reconciliation. It will make you think about the value of humility, the impact of forgiveness, and how often true overcoming lies in having the courage to face the other person with humanity. Because sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply listening. Get ready to dive into an intense journey where each memory carries a piece of truth, and each reunion brings the chance to rebuild something even more beautiful. What if I told you that this story can change the way you see the people who have been or are still in your life? Hold on tight, because this story will not only move you, it will transform you. From their first steps in the playground of their elementary school in Austin, Texas, Mia and Harper seem to have been made of the same invisible material that unites souls even before birth. They had similar tastes, laughed at the same silly things, and when one cried, the other felt as if it were with them. The connection between them was so authentic that even the adults around them said that their friendship seemed like something out of a movie. And in a way, it really was. It was the kind of bond that is born of true empathy, of silent understanding, of that pure kindness that only children are capable of offering without filters. They didn't need to say much. A look was enough to know what the other was feeling. It was an affection that transcended their childhood years, took root in adolescence, and blossomed with an almost sacred force. They shared diaries, secrets, and even fears of the future, as if swearing loyalty without needing words. Mia was more reserved, full of emotional intelligence and a sensitivity that made her notice details that went unnoticed by others. Harper, on the other hand, was bold, driven by an enchanting mix of courage, initiative, and contagious joy. Together, they balanced each other like yin and yang. In difficult times like when Harper lost her grandfather or when Mia faced insecurity. Because she didn't feel good enough at sports, it was the strength of their friendship that sustained everything. Compassion was practical, in the notes hidden in notebooks, in the silent hugs at the end of a bad day, in the afternoons of shared study with laughter and confidences. It's curious how some friendships carry within them a kind of ancestral wisdom, as if life were saying, you chose each other before you even knew what it was to choose. And this, since forever, became the basis of everything. When they entered high school together, there was no longer any doubt. Nothing and no one could separate them. Plans for the future were always set in the plural. When we go to college ... When we travel together ... When we open our own literary cafe. It was always us, never me. It was a brotherhood without blood ties, but with all the strength of genuine love and gratitude for having found each other in the chaos of the world. And like everything that is intensely beautiful, it seemed eternal. But life has its unexpected curves. And no matter how strong a bond is, sometimes it is tested. And the way this link reacts to tests says a lot about the soul of the person who carries it. In the late afternoons, sitting on the roof of Harper's house with their feet dangling in the air and the breeze blowing on their faces, Mia and Harper would make plans like someone drawing a treasure map. Their ideas flowed like a fast-flowing river, studying journalism at the same university, sharing an apartment decorated with fairy lights and hanging plants, working together on a social project, starting a podcast about stories of overcoming obstacles. All of this was more than just teenage chatter. It was the pure expression of hope, of the desire to build a future where collaboration and loyalty were the foundations. And there was also a certain innocence there, an unshakable belief that, together, everything would work out. It was as if they had found a secret formula for overcoming life's challenges. Mia dreamed of writing books about ordinary people with extraordinary stories. Harper wanted to travel the world interviewing inspiring women who, with courage and humility, changed their communities. And together, they believed they could unite these two passions for a greater cause. They even put together a vision board with magazine clippings and inspiring quotes. One of them said, "The best thing about the future is being able to dream it with someone who truly understands you." It was this kind of sincerity that made everything so magical. They celebrated each other's achievements as if they were theirs too. Mia's acceptance into a literary contest was celebrated with a cake made by Harper, filled with little notes of gratitude. Harper's presentation at the science fair had Mia in the front row, screaming with pride. There was a rare type of emotional intelligence there that strengthened dreams and dissolved insecurities. Over time, these plans began to take shape. They took college entrance exams together, made travel plans, and saved money in a little jar labeled "Our Freedom." It was beautiful to see. Two young women who, instead of competition, cultivated partnership. It was living proof that friendship, when watered with love, respect, and a little bit of madness, becomes fertile soil for any kind of innovation. They believed in the generosity of destiny, in the strength of union, and in the beauty of shared life. But destiny, oh, destiny sometimes likes to put obstacles in the path of dreamers. And even the best laid plans can bend in the face of the unpredictable curves of existence. At first, it was almost imperceptible. Small absences, shorter answers, laughter that seemed forced. Mia and Harper still saw each other frequently, but something had changed, and neither of them could explain exactly what. It was as if a fog had begun to form between them, clouding what had once been crystal clear. Silences began to weigh more than words. And that is how many relationships begin to fall apart, not with shouting, but with silence. Trust, which once flowed freely, began to encounter invisible barriers. Some messages took a long time to be answered. Commitments that were once sacred were postponed. Kindness gave way to a kind of strange formality, like someone walking on tiptoe around something they fear touching. Harper, always spontaneous, began to feel a silent insecurity in the face of Mia's reactions. And Mia, in turn, began to keep quiet in the face of Harper's actions that she would have previously dismissed with a laugh. Understanding gave way to unspoken judgments. A snide comment here, a suspicious look there, and complicity gave way to distrust. No one wanted to hurt the other, but they were already hurting each other just by not saying what they felt. It's funny how the fear of confrontation can end up pushing us further apart. If they had had the courage to talk at that moment, perhaps the story would have taken a different path. But the truth is that friendship also requires maintenance. It requires the initiative to say what bothers you honestly. It requires the resilience to accept discomfort in the name of something greater. And so, what was light became dense. Their meetings began to be marked by long silences and forced smiles. And the worst part, each one began to imagine things about the other, creating assumptions where there had previously been trust. Mia began to think that Harper avoided her out of pride. Harper thought that Mia criticized her behind her back. The lack of dialogue fed ghosts, and ghosts, when fed, grow. Instead of exercising empathy and seeking a solution together, they allowed themselves to be guided by fear and insecurity. And so, a bond that seemed unbreakable began to give way under the weight of what was left unsaid. But little did they know, That something would still come along capable of breaking everything once and for all. It all came to a head on a gray afternoon. One of those when the air seems heavier than usual. Mia, distracted in the university cafeteria, accidentally overheard a conversation between colleagues. One of them mentioned that Harper had revealed an intimate secret of hers, something that Mia had only told her. Her blood ran cold. The mind, immediate and cruel, began to assemble a distorted puzzle, fitting pieces together based on assumptions and old hurts. What was doubt became certainty without confirmation. What was partnership turned into distrust in a matter of minutes. Mia didn't look for Harper to ask. She didn't try to verify. She just closed herself off. And with a broken heart, she began to treat her as someone who no longer deserved her trust. A lie told by third parties, without root or explanation, was enough to shake years of love, respect, and affection. Harper, in turn, felt the separation as a blind blow. She didn't understand the reason. She didn't know where she had gone wrong, and worse, she began to doubt herself. She tried to keep in touch, tried to start a conversation, even proposed a coffee like in the old days. But Mia, overcome by hurt and insecurity, refused with coldness disguised as indifference. And so, the betrayal that never existed began to do more damage than a real one. Because the invented hurt, when fed, becomes a silent poison. The two were trapped in an emotional trap, built by assumptions, and the lack of dialogue turned into a thick, almost insurmountable wall. The emotional intelligence, so present in the early years, had given way to pride and poorly healed pain. The bond, once made of compassion and generosity, was now held together by a thread about to snap. But the saddest thing is that neither side knew the full truth. The person who spread the rumor, out of envy, jealousy, or pure malice, never imagined that it could cause such a commotion. And yet, it did. When the seed of doubt is planted in wounded soil, it quickly blossoms. And instead of seeking reconciliation, each one kept feeding the version of the story that seemed most convenient to bear the pain. The power of kindness was buried by the unconscious desire for self-protection. The wisdom of so many years of friendship seemed to have disappeared. And so, based on a betrayal that never happened, trust, that sacred bond, was shattered. But fate, as always, has its curious ways of rewriting what seemed to be over. The moment of confrontation came without warning. It was on a weekend when both were at an event in the city, a reunion of old high school classmates. The reunion was inevitable. Their eyes met like sharp blades. There was anger, pain, an avalanche of feelings that could no longer fit inside their chests. Harper, driven by the need to understand, gathered up the courage and went to Mia. What began with a "we need to talk" soon turned into a whirlwind of accusations, tears, and raised voices. Mia poured out all the accumulated pain, without filter, without pause. She said she felt betrayed, used, deceived. Harper, stunned, tried to defend herself, but each explanation seemed like an insult to Mia's hurt. It was a clash of insecurity versus sincerity. And as in every conflict where there is wounded love, each word hurt like a cut. Harper cried as she tried to explain that she would never betray her best friend's trust. She said she didn't know where it had come from, that it was all a malicious lie. But Mia, overcome by years of frustration and swallowed words, could no longer listen with her heart. Respect, once firm, was shaken. Emotional intelligence, that ability to take a deep breath and look beyond pride, was suffocated by the need to be right. Instead of seeking a solution, both dug deeper into the abyss that separated them. Harper accused Mia of not trusting. Mia accused Harper of manipulating. They shouted things they had never said before, veiled envy, past hurts, silent comparisons. And in the midst of that chaos, something that had once been sacred, broke. When the voices finally fell silent, the environment seemed different. There was no more room for dialogue, only the echo of what had been said, words that, once uttered, cannot be taken back. Mia left the place with red eyes and a wounded soul. Harper stood there, paralyzed, her heart in pieces. That night, they didn't sleep. They went through their memories trying to understand where everything went wrong. And they discovered something terrible. When love is not protected by empathy, it can be destroyed by any breath of pride. The two, now in silence, carried the weight of a friendship that seemed to have come to an end. But how could you erase from your soul years of stories, secrets, and genuine affection? It was impossible to forget. And it was this impossibility that sooner or later would come knocking on the door again. In the days that followed the confrontation, the silence became a muffled scream. It was as if the city had lost its sound, not for lack of noise, but for the absence of meaning. Mia continued her routine, but every little detail of her daily life reminded her of Harper. The playlist in the car, the memes saved on her phone, the coffees that were now drunk in solitude. The silence that once meant comfort between two friends was now heavy, almost unbearable. It was the kind of loneliness that can't be cured with company, because what was missing wasn't physical presence, it was affection, it was love. It was that connection built over years of empathy and understanding. Mia began to wonder if she had been too harsh. But her pride still whispered in her ear, "She betrayed you." Doubt corroded her soul with the subtlety of someone who is no longer sure of what they feel. On the other side, Harper lived a disembodied mourning. She avoided the places they used to go together. She kept the gifts, silenced the memories on social media. She tried to move on with her life, but everything seemed fated. Mia's absence was an open wound. And what hurt the most wasn't the separation itself. It was the injustice of having been judged without the right to defend herself. The fear of trying to get closer and being rejected paralyzed her. But what hurt the most was realizing that she had given up fighting for something so precious. The resilience, once so strong in her, was weakened. The pain gave way to longing, and longing led to introspection. Harper began writing letters that had never been sent. She tried to transform the chaos into words, seeking within herself some form of reconciliation with the past, even if Mia never read them. Both lived in parallel universes, carrying the same emptiness, but unaware that the other was also suffering. The power of kindness, now dormant, still lived within each of them, but to awaken it, it would take courage. Courage to let one's guard down, to ask for forgiveness even when one believes one is right, to listen with an open heart and not through the filters of sorrow. The deafening silence was not only the absence of her friend, it was the absence of herself. Because, sometimes, the pain of losing someone so essential makes us lose our own essence as well. Still, amidst the chaos, a spark of hope persisted. After all, true bonds endure, even when everything around seems to say otherwise. And as destiny loves to surprise, it would only take one detail, one coincidence, for their paths to cross again. There was something cruel about going on with life without the one who knew every detail, the most silly fears, the most secret dreams, the embarrassing stories that became jokes between them. Mia tried to fill the void with new friendships, but she soon realized no one laughed at the same inside jokes. No one understood her silences like Harper. It was like losing a part of her identity. After all, it was from her that she had learned about trust, about sharing her life, about the generosity of being vulnerable. It was from her that she had learned to see the world with more compassionate eyes. Now, with absence knocking on her door in every small gesture of the day, Mia felt the weight of a wound that would not heal. And she asked herself, how can she rebuild something when the foundation was undone by ill-spoken words and poorly digested pride? Harper, in turn, immersed herself in a process of self-discovery. She sought therapy, started practicing yoga, and Read books like The Courage to Be Imperfect by Brené Brown, which talk about vulnerability and reconciliation. She discovered that we often project onto others the pain we carry alone. She understood that she had indeed failed at times, not because of the alleged betrayal, but because she had not realized how fragile Mia was. This self-analysis awakened a new perspective in her. Perhaps reconciliation did not depend on being right or wrong, but on reaching out with humility. The emotional intelligence that flourished within her taught her that listening is more important than making excuses. That sometimes you don't need to understand everything in order to forgive. And that, yes, there is wisdom in recognizing that there are wounds that only heal with the touch of truth. But even with this new perspective, moving forward was still a challenge. There were days when Harper missed sending a simple message. Laughing without thinking, receiving a "you look beautiful today" from the friend who always saw beyond the mirror. And Mia, even surrounded by people, felt alone, because true loneliness is not the absence of company, but the absence of connection. Each one, in their own way, walked with an open scar, trying to learn from the pain. And it was in this interval of silence, in this fertile field of introspection, that life began to sew the invisible threads that connect hearts that were never truly separated. Because the truth is that some friendships, even when wounded, have roots so deep that they withstand the worst storms. The reunion happened on one of those days when life decides to surprise you without warning. It was a rainy and melancholic Saturday afternoon, and Mia had gone to a bookstore in the city center, looking for a gift for a colleague. As she walked through the aisles, she stopped in front of the personal development section, and there, like in a movie scene, Harper was there too. They both froze for a moment. It wasn't like in romantic movies, with soft music in the background and immediate hugs. It was strange, silent, dense, but it was real. Harper's look said more than words, Mia's too. It was as if, in that brief second, all the good and bad memories had crossed paths in a single thread of memory. Insecurity hovered, but there was also a spark of hope, of possible reconciliation. Harper was the first to move. With a shy smile, holding a book in her hands, she made a banal comment. "This one is about forgiveness." "It sounds good," Mia smiled back. It was little, but it was a start. They sat in a cafe next to the bookstore, without planning, without making arrangements. The beginning of the conversation was tense, full of pauses and glances that sought courage, but little by little, the words began to flow again. They talked about time, about life, about everything, and about nothing. It was as if each sentence said push the abyss that separated them a little further away. It was the strength of affection overcoming fear. It was emotional intelligence manifesting itself in the low tone of voice, in the gentle gesture, in the effort not to touch the wounds too abruptly. It was, above all, the power of kindness finding a way to enter again. They didn't solve everything there, far from it. But they left that cafe with something different in their hearts. It wasn't just relief, it was recognition. It was as if destiny, with all its perspicacity, had created that opportunity exactly when they were both most prepared to look at it with humility. The pain was still there, yes, but now it was mixed with gratitude. Gratitude for the bond still existing, however fragile it was. The reunion wasn't magical, but it was true. And that, often, is what matters most. Because the truth, the one that doesn't depend on versions, only on presence, was there, alive between them. And destiny, stubborn as it is, still had bigger plans for these two souls who, despite everything, never stopped recognizing each other. They sat in the park where they used to talk during their high school years. An old wooden bench, covered in dry leaves and memories that insisted on resurfacing. Mia, with her eyes fixed on her hands, took a deep breath. Harper, with her heart beating fast, waited. It was time to open the wound, the one they both knew existed, but avoided touching. Mia began, her voice choked. I believed in something I didn't confirm. And I pushed you away based on a lie. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, it was necessary. It was the pause of the soul preparing for healing. Harper, with tears in her eyes, answered, I just wish you had asked me. I would have told you everything. I would have cried with you. The most difficult conversation of her life began like this, without a script, without defenses, but with a lot of truth. With each sentence spoken, the hurts were unearthed. Not as weapons, but as bridges. Both had the courage to say, it hurt me when you, and also, I was wrong when. There was no more room for pride. Emotional intelligence reigned at that moment, allowing listening to be more important than counterattacks. It was a conversation with tears, yes. With pauses to breathe, to hold back tears, to search for the right words. But it was also a conversation. With love, with respect, with the kind of empathy that only blossoms after much pain. There, they realized that it was not just about what happened, but how they felt during it. And that naming feelings was essential to healing old wounds. In the end, there were no promises. They did not swear that everything would go back to the way it was before. But there was something even more powerful there, the sincerity of those who decided not to run away anymore. Forgiveness, when it springs from the heart, does not need a show. It reveals itself in teary eyes, in a long handshake, in a hug that lasts longer than expected. Both knew that that conversation would not erase the past, but would open a new chapter. A chapter where they could rebuild with more awareness, more maturity, more understanding. Because when you have the courage to face pain head on, reconciliation stops being a wish and becomes an act of bravery. And it was with this spirit that they got up from that bench, lighter, more human, and with a spark of hope burning in their chests again. What came after the conversation was not a return to the past. It was something completely new. Mia and Harper were no longer the same girls who laughed without worries or dreamed of an unbreakable future. Now they carried scars. And curiously, it was these scars that shaped the new version of the bond between them. A bond made of resilience, wisdom, and an understanding that only pain teaches. They began to see each other with more kindness. Affection was no longer automatic, it was intentional. Gratitude for each small exchange grew. Trust, previously broken, was now built step by step, with honesty, respect, and small daily actions. It was a friendship that was less idealized but more real. A bond in which they both knew that to err is human and that to forgive is divine. And deeply liberating. They didn't immediately return to their old habits. Some traditions were left behind, others were reinvented. Instead of daily messages, they exchanged monthly letters. Instead of seeing each other every weekend, they scheduled special meetings to talk in depth. They discovered that emotional innovation, this ability to redefine relationships, is a powerful tool for those who want to grow. They talked about their fears, their insecurities, and how loneliness had taught them lessons that no amount of closeness could have taught them. They realized that the power of kindness is not about being perfect, but about being willing to improve. And so, with patience and initiative, they began to forge a friendship that, even though wounded, survived through the strength of truth. Because when there is love, everything can be rebuilt, not the same, but with more foundation. Today, they look back and don't want to erase what they experienced. On the contrary, they recognize that pain was part of the process of maturing. The bond that now unites them is not the same as in adolescence. It is stronger. It's the kind of connection that's born when two people choose reconciliation over pride, courage over fear, hope over giving up. They shared their stories with others, turning their experiences into a source of inspiration. They gave talks on friendship, empathy, and emotional intelligence. They became living proof that wounds can become windows for light to enter. And in the end, They understood that it's not about going back to how they were before, but about learning to be better than they ever were together. Who is that person who was once your safe haven, but now lives only in your memories? Maybe the story of Mia and Harper has awakened in you the memory of a friendship that seemed eternal, but that was lost somewhere along the way. The truth is that all relationships are subject to ruptures. What differentiates those who overcome and those who are lost forever is the courage to look at the other with empathy and honestly assume one's part. What if the broken bond is not the end, but the beginning of something even truer? Stop and think, how many wounds could start to heal today if you simply sent a message, or listened without interrupting, or reached out without expecting an immediate response? What part of your story can still be reinterpreted with humility, initiative, and wisdom? Isn't it time to use your emotional intelligence to heal what's left pending? The power of reconciliation is not in the other person, it's in you. You can be the bridge. You can be the solution. And believe me, what seems impossible sometimes only needs a step of kindness to start changing. Now tell me, do you have someone you'd like to meet again? Have you ever had a friendship like this that seemed too broken to rebuild? Share it with me in the comments. Your story can inspire others. And if you want to continue learning, evolving, and connecting with profound narratives like this, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and don't miss the next videos. Because here, each story is a chance to look inside and transform what's outside.